Hi, this is Ed from Exotic Blanks, welcoming you to the next tutorial of sorts. This one is making a pen from a whalebone. I've started taking video of virtually every time I'm on the lathe just so that we can take advantage of things that go wrong. And this is going to be an excellent example of what happens when things don't go the way you had planned. So we start off with measuring the drill bit for the size of a Sierra tube. I have put the piece of bone into the chuck, and it's held in place fairly firmly, I thought. So we start drilling, and I actually decided to drill this with a smaller hole. I'm going to need a 10.5 millimeter. Actually, it turns out I need one just a little larger than that for the whalebone. But I started out with a smaller bit. As I recall, it was letter V. I'm not positive of that. But as you can see, the drilling was going pretty well because it was sharp. I just took it off the drill doctor, and it was well sharpened and ready to go. The drilling of the whalebone is relatively simple until here where it stops. And at that point, I didn't know exactly what to do. So I turned off the lathe, and as you'll see, I backed away the tailstock and left this chuck hanging in the air so that I could back it out with my hand. As it turns out, that wasn't too difficult to do. So I did manage to get the drill bit out, and everything was okay, but the hole was no longer in the center. It had moved in the chuck, and so now I had to figure out how to get it to the point where it would be centered again. First, I tried to recenter the whalebone in the chuck without removing it. I did that for a little while, didn't work out very well. So then we went to the concept of take the piece out of the chuck and start trying to see how to center it that way. So after a few failures of trying to get everything squared up, I decided to take it out and try to put the piece back on the bit and then move the bit into the chuck and see if I could get everything square that way. One of the things that I think this brings to light is when you put this and mount it the first time, make sure you put some pressure on it because it's an irregular surface, so you're going to be catching it with just part of your chuck. And if you don't really squeeze it in there pretty good, it is very likely to move on you while you're trying to drill it. So try to make sure that you get it in the chuck as tight as possible on your first go around. Now, I also would say that on this particular piece, I have cut it. It was relatively square when I got it out of the pile, but I didn't like the porous section, and as long as I had some that was not porous, I cut the pen blank down and took that off. So it's very narrow on one side. The hole had to be pretty much right. Now you see me drilling with a larger bit. I went to the 10.5 millimeter bit, found out that that hole also wasn't really large enough, and so what I'm using here is a 27/64 bit and just widening out the hole that I had made with the V bit. This went pretty smoothly, and ultimately it got the thing drilled as far back as I needed it. Another lesson I learned here was drilling on the lathe. It isn't a bad idea when you have problems like this to go to the slowest speed possible. I almost never change the belt on the lathe so that it's going at anything other than the top speed. It's a variable speed lathe, and so I can go back and forth and go from 1,000 up to about 3,500 RPM. Well, in this particular case, I moved it all the way down to the slowest speed, and that made the adjustments significantly easier and everything lined up better. And so from time to time it does make sense to change your drilling speed to the lowest possible and try to do it cleanly. As you can see, there's our hole. The tube fits in it. Then I take it over to the bandsaw, cut off the back end so that we can see all the way through it. And there it is, a finished, ready to use blank. Thank you for watching. This is Ed from Exotic Blanks. Bye now.